Hey guys, it's White Cross. This is part two of our more advanced 0.999 pure silver coins video. So, this is a video that's designed for people who are either already in or maybe looking to go deeper into that pool of 999 silver vehicles in the form of a coin as opposed to a bar. And you'll recall from the earlier videos that I made a very strong distinction between coins, which are made by a sovereign country, typically have a face value, often have a date with a known mintage, and rounds. Rounds are made by a private company, usually don't have a date, don't usually have any kind of a known mintage because they are just purely a bullion purchasing device. It's just a vehicle for owning precious metals. But in the case of the 999 silver products, I wanted to kind of glom them together because, for the sake of brevity, we just have too many things to cover at once. So, in this video, we'll be talking about both coins and privately produced items. Let's put it that way. When I started off the last video, I made sure that I gave a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer financial advice. This is my own experience. These are things that I have encountered in the last 30 years of doing this, buying and selling bullion and precious metals and coins. And I also wanted to quickly recap a couple of the items that we talked about, the terms that we talked about on the last video. That is attrition, which just means that items get lost, broken, stolen, ruined over time. So the existing pieces typically wind up being more rare. Look for that attrition, as it can help you if you take really good care of your items, but it can hurt you if you are not taking really good care of the pieces in your own collection. I also wanted to reiterate that scarcity does not always equal desirability, and age does not always equal valuable. When we talk about some of these older items, people just assume because they are old, they are worth more, and that's not always the case. Sometimes it is, but often it's not. Some new concepts I wanted to kind of bring into this video. The first one is rotation. Rotation is the process that I use and have used over a long period of time, where I have weeded out and cycled through my more common items. I made the determination a long time ago that really common pieces don't really excite me. They don't really get those juices flowing, and they don't make me want to continue deeper into this stacking hobby, whatever you want to call it. So I rotated out my more common pieces in favor of those pieces that you see less often. It's just a good way to build a kind of a more advanced collection, stack, or however you want to call it. But it doesn't always equate to higher value. Those two things that I mentioned before, scarcity and age, don't always mean that the pieces that you're cycling into can be worth more. For me, it's kind of a fun adventure to look for those kind of seldom seen pieces and add those to my stack. I think it makes the stack a little bit more interesting. And another concept that I wanted to talk about quickly is condition. As a coin collector, and I'm coming from the coin collecting field, have been doing that since I was a little kid, and I'm still consider myself a coin collector, numismatist, before I consider myself any kind of a specialist in precious metals. Condition makes a big difference. When you are out looking for items to add to your stack, if you are offered the opportunity to select from a couple, 3 or 4 different examples of a particular item, the loop, the eyeglass that I mentioned in my videos on the equipment that I use, is your best friend. Take that in with you. Take a few minutes. Take a look at the items that you're buying, and always opt for that one item that is the finest condition, with the least scratches, the less evidence of cleaning, the thing that is most original in terms of surfaces and even packing materials. If you can get something in its original box with a certificate of authenticity, it doesn't always equate to more valuable, but having something that is as original as it can be has always been something that I try to focus on, and it seems to have helped me as I've built kind of a more interesting stack of metals. And the third concept or idea that I wanted to just offer to you, and one of the most powerful tools that I have in my arsenal, is ask. Just the concept of asking when you go to look for products, when you're going to a dealer, a show, if there's a local coin shop that you like to go to, I have found that one of my most valuable tools that I have is simply asking, do you have something unusual? Have you gotten anything interesting in recently? And I can't count the number of times where a dealer has shown me something that they thought was a dud, something that they picked up because they bought an entire estate or an entire coin collection that they had no idea what to do with because it was so unusual, or it was something that they know most of their customers would not want, that they've offered it to me, and sometimes they even offer it at a discount just to get rid of it. So ask. It's a good tool to have if you're trying to kind of point out to your dealer that you're after the more interesting things. If you have decided that you want to stack more interesting items, just simply ask your dealer. So a real quick rundown: rotation, that is churning the more average things for the more interesting things. Check out the condition if you have an opportunity. Always try to select the piece that is the most complete with the least amount of wear or scratches or cleaning. And then asking. Just simply ask your dealer if they've got something interesting. So those terms out of the way, I understand that when we're talking about collections of metals, when you've made the leap from a stack or a hoard or just your physical bullion holdings to things that are more interesting, you have kind of made that step. And that step into things that are more interesting is a leap between a collection, or rather a stack and a collection. And that comfort level has to be yours. I'm not trying to give you any advice for anything specific. Once you have made that decision, if you make that decision, it has to be a personal choice. You have to decide at what point a higher premium or scarcity is more important to you than middle of the road items. And when it comes to a stack, there's nothing wrong with having just common items: rolls of silver eagles, rolls of silver rounds, generic 10-ounce bars. There's a beauty in keeping it simple, but obviously if you're watching this video, you're maybe at least intrigued by the idea of what else is out there. So let me just offer some suggestions. By no means a complete listing of everything that's out there, but I'll touch on a few points that I think are the most interesting. The first, when you're talking about larger size 999 products, I wanted to bring in the new pieces that have come out from the US Mint. This is kind of a newer development. Starting in 2019, and if I knew about this, I'd completely forgotten about it, but starting in 2019, all of the US Mints, their commemorative silver dollars, are made out of 999 silver. So no longer are they going to be the 90% silver standard that the dollars that have been for the last couple of hundred years. When it comes to silver bullion or silver commemorative pieces now, the Mint has gone completely into 999 silver. And I've got an example of a modern, somewhat modern set. This is a silver dollar set. It comes with a $5 gold coin. This is for the 1988 Olympics, I think. Silver dollar, and it's the commemorative, and it's the same size and weight and purity of the 90% silver dollars that we've always made. But beginning in 2019, these types of items coming from the Mint will be in 999 silver. I will do a video on these types of sets. I think they're a great opportunity for people who are just getting into stacking gold. I think they make a lot of sense. But for right now, let's go back to the 999 silver. 2021 was the 100th anniversary of the last of the Morgan dollars and the first of the peace dollars. If you follow me online, if you know me, then you know that the 1921 peace dollar is one of my favorite coins. So the Mint made a 2021 peace dollar and made all the different mint marks that had been making 1921 Morgan dollars, including previous Morgan dollars, including some of the mints that are no longer existent. So these are examples of the silver dollars that were released by the Mint in 2021 as commemoratives. So this is the Morgan, and I think, if I remember correctly, this is the Carson City Morgan. 999 silver. The same thing with the 2021 peace dollar, 999 silver. So it's kind of a new development that the Mint has decided that demand is strong enough. The cost is so high making special 90% planchets that they've just gone to the 999 products. And since we're dealing in items that are larger than 1 ounce, I wanted to mention those newer 5-ounce silver quarters. Those are the State Park quarters and the various commemoratives that have come out in the last 10 years. The Mint has been releasing 5-ounce versions of those also in 999 silver. That is a big silver coin made by the US Mint in 999 silver. I have a little bit of problem with those. We've talked about face values before, and those 5-ounce pucks, as they're sometimes called, have a 25-cent face value. So I've had a few of those come through my stack, but I've cycled through them pretty quickly. They didn't really make a lot of sense to me. That said, you can usually pick those up with beautiful designs, sometimes slabbed by NGC or PCGS for little or no premium over the cost of the silver that's in them. So keep your eyes out for them if you like a larger coin from the US Mint. I also wanted to mention that the US Mint just this week, as I'm recording this video, released a 2.5-ounce medal, a 2.5-ounce 999 silver medal commemorating the U.S. Army. If you were one of those few lucky 10,000 people that got it, congratulations to you. I didn't even try this time, but it's an interesting new development, a 2.5 troy ounce 999 silver medal. And I think demand was quite strong for that. More evidence that the Mint is producing these products that the consumer seems to want, larger 999 silver items. So those are some modern Mint options if you are still interested in going a little bit deeper. And it's every indication that the Mint is going to continue to increase and put out even more of these types of products. I know they're already releasing the 2023 Morgans and Peace Dollars, and more of these metals are on the way. So that's one area where if you wanted to get into a little bit deeper dive of 999 silver, that pool is going to be quite deep going forward. Next thing I wanted to touch on was some privately made examples. And I'll kind of go from in the past to a little bit closer. In the 1940s, 1950s, there was kind of a boom in medals. So people in the United States started collecting art medals. Those medals, usually kind of like a 1-ounce round, sometimes they got a little bit bigger. Sometimes they were struck in bronze, and in fact, bronze was probably a little bit more common. But some of those larger pieces sometimes struck in sterling silver and sometimes struck in pure silver. And they were two mints that were really leading the charge for that new kind of exciting hobby of collecting metals. And these metals could contain images of all the presidents or famous poets or famous works of art. Those metals were made by either the Metallic Arts Company, or the Metal Arts Company. Both of them were based in New York. I think Metallic Art was based in New York City and Metal Arts was based in Rochester, New York. But for the better part of 20 or 30 or even 40 years, lots of these metals were turned out. This is another interesting area that you can take a slightly deeper dive into 999 silver. If you look at those edge marks, if you look at the certificates of authenticity, you're looking for proof that it says that it's made out of 999. And most of the time, they'll actually say it on the edge or somewhere on the metal. For a long time, these pieces were just chucked in the melt bin and they got very little respect. But as with a lot of these earlier pieces, so many meltings have happened between the late 1970s and here we are in 2023, that a lot of the populations for these types of items has probably been decimated, or even worse, you're talking about items that probably didn't have a huge mintage to begin with. And now a lot of them could have, a few hundred or maybe 1,000 or 2,000 survivors. That's not very many. And every day that goes past, they're getting older. There's that attrition again. There's that age again. I've got some examples here of pieces that came out a little bit later. These are from 1961. There was a numismatist, a coin collector called Toivo Johnson. That was his name. And he was fascinated with the famous coin engravers throughout history. So he made medals, or he actually contracted with the Metal Arts Company to make these medals that were kind of paying tribute to the famous engravers of American coinage, and then he started making some for foreign coinage too. So this one is the Christian Gobrecht medal. If you have a seated coin, a seated Liberty coin, you know his designs. This is his homage, or his, tip of the hat to that medalist. And it's got some details about him on the back, some of his more famous designs. This one is for Augustus St. Gaudens. And if you're a coin collector or a gold stacker, you know St. Gaudens from the $20 gold eagle that has his name. It's a $20 saint named after him. Or you might know the $10 Indian that came out the same period of time, 1907 to 1933. St. Gaudens designed both of those. And on the back, you can see Aspet, his home and studio, but also a rendition of the $20 St. Gaudens gold piece. So these came out a little bit later than the metals that I was talking about, but way before we removed silver from our common circulating coinage, there was still interest in making these larger size metals. And these are actually beasts of metals. These weigh 7 or 8 troy ounces a piece. There are 6 in the series. I'm fortunate that I have all 6 of those pieces, but I was able to pick these pieces up for melt, or right about melt. So metals, privately minted metals, declining population, interest can be a little bit small in them, but as with any sleeper, they may wake up someday and people might realize that all of these were melted in such large numbers that the survivors are quite scarce, and the survivors in excellent condition even more scarce than the number of survivors. And then I wanted to talk briefly about privately minted rounds. Now, a round is a silver coin shaped bullion product, typically 1 troy ounce of 999 pure silver. They gained popularity right about the time that Americans stopped having any silver in our circulating coinage. So I'm talking about the 40% Franklin half dollars, 1970. That period of time, once again, there was a vacuum where people weren't quite sure what silver was going to come next. There was still a demand for silver, but there wasn't a supply that was easy to tap into. So this is when we start to see the birth of consumer-oriented 999 silver products. And we'll talk a little bit about those in the bar videos that are coming up next. But here's an example of kind of an early round. This is a Mondanero. These aren't particularly rare. If you're a silver stacker, you may have encountered these at some time in the past. This one was made by a company called Wade Ventures in 1973, struck by a company called Intermint in Nevada. So this is the one Mondanero, their attempt at making a 1 troy ounce 999 silver trade vehicle. And what I didn't realize up until relatively recently is that they also made a 2 troy ounce, 2 Mondanero piece. Look how thick this one is. And this one, also same company, same idea, 2 Mondaneros, 2 troy ounces of silver. These are a lot more scarce than the 1 ounce, but they also made a 3 ounce. So this is a 3 Mondanero. Look how beefy that one is. Again, we're talking about items that are a little bit larger than a 1 ounce, 999 silver, a little bit more unusual. These are good examples. By no means the only examples that are out there. There are so many rounds that exist right now, including some quite scarce that go back quite a ways. But if you don't ask, if you're not keeping your eyes open, you might miss out on things like this. And I'm really glad when one of my local dealers just happened to get 3 or 4 examples of the 2 and the 3 Mondaneros, and I jumped at the chance. I cycled out of those kind of more common items. I rotated, there's that rotation term, out of some of more common vehicles for things that were a little bit more scarce. I'd never seen the 2 and the 3 ounce before, so I had a feeling that they were unusual enough, and that was worth it to me to try to get those pieces and replace some more common items with things that are maybe a little more scarce. There's a website called Numisma, which has information about coins and some metals. They have the rotation or the orientation of the coin or metal. They show the population, the mintage, the year that they were made. If there's a mint mark, they show the metal content. It's a pretty valuable website to use. And Numisma actually had a listing for these pieces, the 1, the 2, and the 3 Mondaneros. They were listed in their catalog as being quite scarce, and they didn't even have an image for the 3 troy ounce Mondanero. So I was able to provide them with an image of this piece just a couple of days ago, and it has now become their plate coin. So if you want to go to Numisma and look up the Mondaneros, the piece you'll see for the 3 Mondaneros, the 3 troy ounce piece, is this exact coin. It's this exact round. And they list this coin as being incredibly rare. The 3 is on a scale of 1 to 100. They list it as a 100. So I know there's some other examples out there, but they are quite scarce. Good examples of some scarce rounds. Again, not all rounds are scarce, not all old rounds are scarce, but you get a kind of a feeling if you haven't seen something before and it kind of makes you feel a little bit more excited when you see something you haven't seen before, a good opportunity to add it to your stack. Where are we? So we talked about the privately minted metals in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. We're talking about some of the earlier rounds. These date from 1973. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was some foreign pieces. So if you have watched the earlier videos, then you've had an opportunity to see some of the rounds that were made by and for Manfred, Tadella, and Brooks, those MTD rounds that came out in the mid-1980s. Here's an example of it. This is one that was made for the big bullion broker in New York, NTB, and this one was made by Johnson Matthey. You can see the little JM mark down at the bottom. 1980s. But they weren't the only ones that were making rounds for MTB. This is a good example of one that was made exact same style and shape as the smaller ones, the 1 ounce ones. This is a 10 ounce one. So this is a 10 ounce round made of 9999 silver for Manfred, Todrella, and Brooks. And this one was made by the Mexican Mint. That's actually the mint mark for the Mexico City Mint that's been in existence since the 1500s. So I had an opportunity to pick this piece up for close to melt, and I jumped at the chance. Again, I'd never seen this before, so I had a feeling that it was pretty scarce, and it's a pretty scarce issue, but there's cross-collector appeal, and we'll touch on that in some of the later videos also. People that collect Mexican coinage, people that collect this style of coinage, the patriotic style, and people that just want a nice, unusual piece of silver. This has got a little bit more appeal than just a standard 10 troy ounce bar. And then finally, the last piece I wanted to give you an example of, this is a Vienna Mint 5 troy ounce commemoration. I believe it's the 400th anniversary of the thaler. Thaler is the word for a big silver coin from which we get our name dollar. So it's the same root. Thaler, the root came from a Joachim's Thaler, which is a valley in Germany where they mined the silver from which the first dollars came from. But this is a commemorative of the release of that first. So it's a coin of a coin. So it's a little bit more collector interest, that cross-collector appeal that I talked about. In this case, it's a 5 troy ounce 999 pure silver coin, a commemorative of a coin. Cross-collector appeal, German or Austrian rather, collector appeal. It's historic now. It's 45 years old in its own right, or 40 years old, somewhere in there. So a little bit more interesting. And again, this is an example of a piece that I was able to pick up from a local dealer because he had no idea what he was going to do with it and didn't have a set client list that was interested in it. So I was able to get this piece for very close to melt. So some examples of some modern mint pieces, some classic pieces from the middle of the 20th century, in this case 1960s, these metals that can often be made out of 999 silver. Always check those edges to see if they're marked. Always check the certificate of authenticity. You don't want to buy something that's pewter or sterling silver if you're just interested in 999 silver. Some examples of some scarce older rounds dating back to the early 1970s. And then we've got some foreign pieces that also answer that question. If I wanted to get larger 999 silver pieces with a little bit of history, but maybe a little bit of foreign flavor to it, Mexico and Austria. To recap some of those terms and expressions that we talked about, old doesn't always equal valuable, so beware that just because something is old, it doesn't mean it's necessarily valuable. Scarce also doesn't equal value all the time. If you've got something that's unusual and older, look for condition. Try to find pieces that are really nice. And that's one of the things that attracted me to these Mondaneros, is that they're brilliant uncirculated condition. They hadn't been beat up. And then finally, that one important, powerful tool, ask. Ask your dealer. Just ask them if they've got something unusual. You never know what you're going to find. You never know what somebody brought in 10 years ago that they stuck away on a shelf, or that somebody brought in 2 hours ago that they were wondering what they were going to do with. And often they are glad to have a buyer who will pay for it and walk out the door with it, so they don't have to worry about inventorying it and putting it up for sale. Thank you for watching this part 2 of some advanced 999 silver coins, the larger size coins. Once again, if you have any comments or suggestions, questions about any of these pieces, these are just representative pieces. The market for these kinds of things is so deep and vast that you can really get lost in any of these categories. But if you got any specific questions, leave them in the comment section and I'll try to answer them for you. Suggestions about other videos you'd like to see me make, leave those as well. Please remember to like and subscribe. We are on the cusp of 100 subscribers, and hopefully by the time you see this video, we'll be well over 100 subscribers. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into physical precious metals.